Due to copyright, I can't publish many audiobooks on YouTube. At our audiobook novel service, we offer access to over 300 full novels from Pocket FM, Webnovel, Audible, Wuxia, and more, all in high-quality audio format. Each novel is available with a one-time payment only. No subscriptions, no monthly payment, and no ads. Payments via PayPal or Ko-fi. To browse the full list of available novels, message me directly on Telegram or WhatsApp, or check out our full catalog on Discord. Chapter 378. Forestania. Hearing his explanation, Ignatius sighed with emotion. You were lucky. Most catastrophe-grade beasts are prideful creatures, so they wouldn't willingly follow someone. You must treasure it well. Alaric nodded. Yes, my lord. The two chatted for the next 10 minutes before Ignatius excused himself. Let's chat another time, your highness. The others might be suspicious if we disappear for too long. Alaric agreed with him, so he didn't stop the old man from leaving. All right. If you need anything, don't hesitate to tell me, my lord. Ignatius nodded and left after putting on his helmet. Looking at his vigorous and solid gait, no one would be able to tell that he was an old man. With Lord Ignatius' support, we can thin out Harun's troops and catch them by surprise, but we must come up with a perfect strategy to deal more damage to enemy troops. Without a proper plan, the enemies might retreat and call for support. A prolonged battle wouldn't be ideal for Forestania, since there were still other neighboring nations covetously eyeing their lands. For instance, the Empire of Veronica in the south. Before Liam was killed by a mysterious curse-type ability, he mentioned something about Veronica. Unfortunately, he was killed before he could tell them anything. To this day, they still haven't found the person who killed Liam. It seemed like they had disappeared. Alaric shook off his random thoughts and headed back to his tent to get some rest. More than a week had passed since the battle in Ackland Pass, but the enemy troops didn't seem to have the intention of attacking them for the time being. Everyone in the fortress felt uneasy as the days passed. They felt that the enemy was only gathering more troops. On the other hand, they still hadn't fully repaired the damage to the fortress. There were still many things to restore, and even their troops weren't ready for another battle. The only good news was that more reinforcements had arrived. Their initial troop count of about 120,000 went up to over 170,000. However, even with the increase in their numbers, everyone was still worried about the upcoming battle. At this moment, Alaric gathered all the military officers in the fortress to deepen their bond. They had different affiliations, so it was necessary to establish teamwork with each other. Otherwise, they would be like a pile of loose sand that would quickly fall apart at the slightest disturbance. There had been minor disputes between our warriors. Although there had been no reports of deaths, the number of conflicts had increased. If we don't do something about this, it is only a matter before someone gets killed. Alaric said with a serious expression. The atmosphere in the fortress was tense, so the soldiers' state of mind was unstable. Because of this, conflict would arise between different factions, which would sometimes lead to a fistfight or even a brawl. Your Highness, I will warn our troops to be more understanding and more careful in their actions. Someone spoke up. Your Highness, how about we hold joint trainings to establish a deeper connection between our troops? Another one suggested, his words gaining everyone's approval. If they trained together, their teamwork would be more solid. The soldiers would also be able to familiarize themselves with the other groups. What do you think, everyone? Do you agree with this suggestion? Alaric scanned the faces of the people present. Most of them nodded their heads while the others simply remained silent. Finally, after a thorough discussion, Alaric and Giovanni approved the proposal. They tacitly agreed to let Kristen Evander oversee the joint training. With his presence and his status, no one would dare to cause any trouble. Soon, the joint training of the troops began. The days passed in the blink of an eye, and another week went by. Harun's troops didn't show up, so the joint training continued without pause. With the efforts of Kristen and the military officers, the army became more solid than it was before. On the 18th day since the battle in Ackland Pass, Harun's troops finally appeared. Sound the horns. The enemies are coming. Get your equipment and weapons. Everyone to your stations. The military officers barked out, issuing orders to their troops. The soldiers moved in an orderly manner, showing the results of their training. Everyone moved to their respective positions and waited for further command. At this moment, Alaric wore his armor and stepped out of his tent. Bring me a horse, he shouted. A moment later, a warrior brought him a disaster-grade war horse which had been prepared for him. For this battle, he would be leading the cavalrymen together with Galliner. Giovanni would stay at the fortress to take command, while André would lead the infantrymen. As for Kristen and the Griffin Knights' order, they would wait for Giovanni's command. They had already discussed their battle strategy, so everyone knew where to go. Brum! The sound of the war horns echoed across the mountain pass, making everyone feel nervous. Artillery units, load the boulders and wait for my signal. Giovanni's voice echoed at the main gates of the fortress. Archers, get ready. In the next moment, the collective roaring of the enemies echoed from beneath the mountains. It has begun. Alaric muttered with a grim look. He put on his helmet and turned his head to the cavalrymen. He could sense their unease. "Everyone listen up." He shouted, his words gathering everyone's attention. Sensing their gazes on him, Alaric continued. "The enemies are approaching, and we are the only ones who can stop them from invading our lands. If we fall here, the western region will be taken away from us. Our families, friends, and neighbors would be enslaved. To stop that from happening, we must emerge victorious." As soon as his words fell, everyone felt their blood pumping with vigor. Alaric noticed the change in their eyes, and he took the chance to increase their morale. He raised his fist and roared, "For Estania!" Chapter 379. Marco Herald defends the eastern walls. Harun's advance signaled the start of the second battle in Ackland Pass. The fortress's trebuchets released massive boulders that caught fire upon taking flight and fell upon Harun's troops like meteorites. Boom! 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 The soldiers within the blast radius of the boulders were struck by the sharp debris and were instantly killed. The ones who had survived were grievously wounded, screaming as they crawled through the rubble. Hundreds of others caught fire and were slowly engulfed by fearsome flames, dying agonizing deaths that chilled the hearts of the onlookers. However, even after their comrades died, Harun continued to advance. Hundreds of thousands of warriors rushed towards the fortress from different directions. The roars of the warriors and the constant explosions caused by the artillery projectiles echoed across the mountain pass. It was total chaos. Both sides tacitly agreed not to send their most dominant force into action. It was as if they had already decided to let their armies clash and test each other's strength. At this moment, Giovanni, who was atop the walls of the main gates, noticed that something was amiss. "Strange. Why does it seem like there are fewer soldiers here?" He frowned as he observed the approaching enemy beneath the mountain. According to Alaric, in the last battle, Harun had concentrated their troops towards the main route, which directly faced the main gates of the fortress. However, the number of enemy troops in the main route at this moment was below 100,000. A bad feeling rose in his heart. They are focusing their attacks on another side of the fortress. Thinking about this, Giovanni immediately called 3 members of the Griffin Knights in order to check the other 3 sides of the fortress. After sending the Griffin Knights, Giovanni found his eyes flashed with worry. "Should I send Zephyr now?" He mumbled, but he quickly discarded the idea. The catastrophe-grade beast was their main combat force, and sending it soon would trigger Harun to send their mythical knights. Although it was strong, it wasn't omnipotent. Giovanni didn't want to take such risks. While he was waiting for the Griffin Knights reports, the situation on the eastern side of the fortress was becoming increasingly chaotic. The enemies they faced numbered almost 200,000. It was an amount that was more than 10 times their own. Against such overwhelming numerical disadvantage, the defenders on the eastern side of the fortress panicked. Only a few managed to remain calm, and one of them was their appointed commander, the Western Sword Marquis Marco Herald. He had come to Ackland Pass after recovering his wounds. With his strength and his status, he was quickly appointed as the commander of the eastern garrison. Grim-faced Marco eyed the approaching enemy troops. They also had trebuchets and ballistas, but against 200,000 warriors, they couldn't even slow down their advance. "Archers, knock your arrows!" he shouted while gesturing with his arm. Upon hearing his words, the archers took aim and knocked their arrows. The enemies would soon enter their range. Marco was waiting for this exact moment. "Release!" he shouted as soon as the enemies stepped within their range. "Su! Su! Su!" Thousands of arrows appeared in the sky, looking like a large flock of migratory birds. In the next moment, they plunged into the ground and struck the enemy troops, turning them into bloody sieves. The dying screams of the soldiers echoed like a tune of death, making Harun's troops flustered. "Shield bearers, forward! Raise your shields and protect the siege units." A familiar voice suddenly drifted into their ears. It was their strategist Lemuel. This old man held the highest rank in their army, excluding the 2 mythical knights. His presence calmed their restless hearts. Meanwhile, atop the eastern walls of the fortress, Marco suddenly sensed an aura approaching him. He turned his head, his eyebrows furrowed. "That is a Griffin Knight." Marco quickly spotted the large griffin. "What is the situation here, my lord?" the Griffin Knight asked the moment he descended upon the eastern wall. Hearing this, Marco immediately told him the truth. The Griffin Knight's face turned grave. "Please buy as much time as possible. I will report the situation to His Highness and request reinforcements." "All right. Make it quick. We won't be able to hold them for long." Marco nodded. The Griffin Knight didn't linger and left in haste. After he left, Marco turned his head towards the enemy troops. They had already stepped into the first layer of their traps, which consisted of several deep pitfalls with sharp blades at the bottom. The pitfalls killed hundreds of warriors. Most of them died from asphyxiation. "My lord, they are about to cross the second layer of traps," a warrior reported with a grave look. Marco nodded. It was about time for him to step onto the battlefield. He jumped off the wall and climbed onto his horse. He then put on his helmet and looked at the gathered cavalrymen and infantrymen. A total of 10,000 warriors, a negligible amount compared to the number of enemy troops. "Soldiers, prepare to charge with me," Marco shouted as he unsheathed his swords. Everyone took a deep breath upon hearing his words. Soon the eastern gate was lifted. Seeing this, Marco raised one of his swords and bellowed, "Charge!" He squeezed his legs and his horse quickly galloped forward. The cavalrymen and infantrymen immediately followed, roaring at the top of their lungs. At this moment the enemies had already crossed the last layer of traps. With nothing to stop them, they charged towards the fortress with ferocious expressions. The numerous traps killed thousands of their comrades, making them incredibly furious. They wanted nothing more than to tear apart Estania's troops, to avenge their dead companions. "They want to stop us with a mere 10,000 troops." Lemuel, who was facilitating the attack, sneered when he saw Marco leading 10,000 warriors to block them. Chapter 380, Loras Marchon. Chapter 380, Loras Marchon. Lemuel thought that the enemies were only putting up a futile resistance, but something unbelievable happened right in front of his eyes. The 10,000 warriors led by Marco stood their ground by using the steep slopes to their advantage. Lemuel felt a sense of déjà vu as he watched this scene. Something similar happened on the first battle in Ackland Pass. He had even almost perished at that time. How come their warriors are so strong? Marco in particular was very conspicuous. He was unbeatable. Wherever he went, dozens of warriors would perish. His swords moved like ghosts, undetectable and deadly. It wasn't just him, there were also a few notable warriors following him. Although not as impressive as Marco, they could fight multiple enemies at once. In just a quarter of an hour, thousands of Harun's troops were killed, whereas only several hundred died on the opposing side. If it weren't for their numerical advantage, they would have already faced failure. This realization made Lemuel's face sink. "Archers, shoot them with your arrows," he shouted, his face cold. Hearing his words, Harun's troops hesitated. "My lord, if we shoot them, we might hit our comrades." One of their military officers hesitated. Lemuel glared at him. "Are you questioning my orders?" The military officer's face darkened as he shook his head. "I wouldn't dare, my lord." "Then do as I fucking say and shoot them down with our arrows." Lemuel barked, his face contorting with anger. The repeated setback made him agitated, and it had unknowingly clouded his judgment. He was so eager to gain merits that he had even resorted to extreme decisions. In the next moment, thousands of arrows blotted the sky and fell upon Marco's troops. Seeing this, Marco was stunned. "What are they doing? Are they planning to sacrifice the lives of their men just to eliminate us?" "Lift your shields," he shouted to his troops. However, his voice could barely be heard in this chaotic situation. Only those who were near him managed to hear his words. Most were unable to defend themselves on time, causing their bodies to be pierced and leaving numerous bloody wounds. Hundreds were killed immediately, while a few thousand had injuries of varying degrees. "Why are you hitting us? Friendly fire! Friendly fire!" Many warriors from Harun complained upon seeing the deaths of their companions at the hands of their allies. However, their complaints were met with cold indifference. The barrage of arrows didn't stop killing more in the process. On the other hand, Marco's troops also faced heavy casualties since they were the main target. Almost a third of them died, while half of the survivors had arrows stuck to their bodies, making them bleed profusely. Insane. Their commander must have gone insane. Marco's expression darkened at the brutal sight. He felt the opposing side's commander was so cruel. He didn't even spare his men. Filled with profound rage, Marco stimulated his energy core and unleashed a concentrated burst of mana to strengthen his physical body. While locking his gaze on a certain target, he then squeezed his legs and urged his horse to rush forward. Lemuel was very noticeable from the enemy formation, since he was the only one riding a special mount. Even an idiot would be able to tell that he held significant authority. Marco guessed that this old man was an enemy military officer, so he targeted him. "Out of my way!" He forced his way into the enemy formation. Harun's troops tried to stop him, but he was like an unstoppable beast. Those who stood in his path were killed with just a few swings of his swords. Marco penetrated the enemy formation, leaving a trail of blood that stretched for almost half a mile. Seeing Marco approaching him, Lemuel felt inexplicably nervous, but he didn't show it on his face. The other party was a transcendent knight just like him, but he could sense the vast difference in their strength. Feeling nervous, Lemuel shouted, "Kill him! Whoever can kill him will receive land from me." Under his command, hundreds of warriors charged towards Marco, roaring excitedly. Marco, who was powered by his energy core, remained fearless in the face of hundreds of enemies. He brandished his swords with terrifying force, killing dozens of men with each strike. No one could get close to him, and those who did had been decapitated. Shit. Just how strong is that guy? Lemuel's face was covered with sweat. Marco was getting closer to him, and no one was able to even slow him down. "What have you done, Lord Lemuel?" A furious voice drifted into his ear. Lemuel frowned and turned his head. Approaching him from behind on horseback was a middle-aged man with long curly black hair. He was holding a massive warhammer that was double his size. This man was a transcendent knight just like him. His name was Loras Marchand. He was a former general of Harun known for being overly protective of his soldiers. He had even opposed the imperial family once for the sake of protecting his subordinates. Because of this, Loras was stripped of his military title and was reduced to commoner status. Lemuel was slightly afraid of this man, so he didn't dare to retort. He just looked away and muttered, "Loras, I have no time to argue with you. If you want us to win, then kill that man at once." Loras was seething with anger. Some of the soldiers killed by the barrage of arrows were his men. He took a deep breath to hold back his rage. He then moved his eyes towards Marco. "I will deal with you later," Loras muttered coldly while giving Lemuel a sidelong glance. The old strategist didn't want to look weak in front of his men, so he snorted in response. "Are you the one who ordered to release those arrows?" A chilling voice suddenly echoed. Loras stared deeply at Marco and was about to respond when Lemuel replied. "It was this old man who made the order." Chapter 381. Loras versus Marco. Marco, whose body was drenched in blood, looked incredibly terrifying. He moved his eyes towards Lemuel, making the latter shudder subconsciously. "So it's you." His horse had already been killed, so he walked towards Lemuel with heavy footsteps. Each step left a bloody footprint on the ground. Suddenly a figure blocked Marco's path. It was Loras Marchand. "I admire your courage, but you must stop here." Hearing this, Marco didn't say anything and just brandished his swords ferociously. "Get out of my way." Loras frowned and quickly made his move. Clang. Sparks flew violently in all directions after their weapons collided. Marco didn't stop. He released a series of slashes imbued with his mana. Whoosh! Whoosh! His swords were too fast for even Lemuel to see their trajectories. However, Loras wasn't your average transcendent knight. He used his instincts to defend against Marco's speedy strikes. Clang! 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 How does he still have this much energy after recklessly forcing his way here? Loras was shocked by Marco's seemingly inexhaustible mana. Clang! The two clashed a dozen times, causing shockwaves with every collision. No one dared to get closer to them, afraid that they would be killed by the immense force of the two transcendent knights. Lemuel, who was watching their battle, was stunned. Loras was no ordinary fighter. He was even recognized as one of the strongest transcendent knights in Harun. However, such a formidable warrior was now fighting toe-to-toe against an exhausted warrior. Should I help Loras? He thought for a moment. He was confident in Loras' strength, but he didn't want another accident to happen. Thinking about this, Lemuel's eyes flashed with killing intent. He silently imbued mana into his horsetail whisk and squeezed his legs, urging his mount to move forward. In the next moment, he swung his horsetail whisk, bringing about a multitude of wind blades that hurtled towards Marco. Whoosh! Whoosh! Marco was focused on his battle with Loras, so he failed to detect the sneak attack. "Lemuel, are you looking down on me?" Loras swung his warhammer and erased the wind blades from existence. Boom! Marco was taken aback. He realized that those wind blades were aimed at him, but why did his opponent block them? Baffled, he looked at Loras, who was glaring at Lemuel. An internal conflict? He thought. Lemuel didn't expect Loras to destroy his wind blades. "Loras, what are you doing? We are at war. Are you planning to be stubborn like that idiot Edgar?" Hearing this name being mentioned, Loras' face darkened. "Don't interfere. This is my last warning for you," he muttered, his tone laced with threat. Lemuel was incensed. Things were developing beyond his control again. "Suit yourself," he snorted, clearly afraid of Loras. He noticed that the 10,000 warriors brought by Marco had been mostly annihilated. Only 1,000 of them remained, stubbornly resisting their troops. Once the remaining enemies were gone, the soldiers on the eastern walls wouldn't be able to stop them from besieging the fortress. "Have fun fighting with that madman while I collect more merits. Once this battle is over, I will get enough resources to attempt a breakthrough to the mythical realm. By then, let's see if you can still strut around in front of me." Lemuel sneered in his mind. He ignored them and went ahead to facilitate the siege on the eastern walls. However, just when he was about to strike the remaining 1,000 soldiers, he heard a commotion from the eastern gates. For Astania! Thousands of cavalrymen suddenly poured out from the gates, rushing towards them with overwhelming momentum. Moreover, he recognized the two people leading the charge. It's them. One was the man who killed Edgar, while the other was the man who had almost killed him. He subconsciously stopped his mount, hesitating to join the battle. He gritted his teeth and chose to remain in the back lines. "I will preserve my strength for now. Once they are exhausted, I will lead my men to demolish them," he told himself, but he knew that he was only making excuses. However, he wasn't the least bit ashamed. History is written by victors. I will win this war and leave a legendary mark in Haroun's history. While he was daydreaming about the future, more than 50,000 cavalrymen had already stepped out of the eastern gates. Leading them were Alaric and Galaner. At this moment Alaric noticed Marco fighting with another transcendent knight further within enemy lines. "Galaner, follow me," Alaric shouted as he urged his horse to move towards Marco's location. Hearing his words, Galaner followed him without hesitation. The two led a small unit composed of 50 elite knights to push their way into the heart of the enemy's formation. Haroun's troops blocked their path, preventing them from advancing further. Seeing this, Alaric snorted. He didn't even bother to use his sword techniques against these cannon fodder. With a series of casual strikes, he killed hundreds of enemies. The corpses of those he had killed turned into ice and broke into tiny fragments. Galaner and the others were already used to this, so they weren't surprised, but Haroun's troops were terrified after witnessing his unusual power. With Alaric's intimidating power, the enemies subconsciously made way for them. Lemuel, who was watching this, was furious. "What are you idiots doing? Stop them at once. Don't let them destroy our formation," he roared. Once their battle formation collapsed, they would be pushed back by the enemy. How could Lemuel allow this? "Shield bearers, porcupine formation. You must hold out even if you bleed. The rest of you encircle them. Once they are surrounded, kill them." Lemuel issued a series of commands. The military officers quickly relayed his orders to the troops. In the next moment, a battalion of shield bearers consisting of 800 men suddenly blocked Alaric's group from advancing. However, Alaric didn't seem to have the intention of slowing down. He gathered mana into his short sword and activated its engraved ability. "Destroy them," he shouted coldly. Chapter 382. He got me good. Galaner took the initiative to lead the charge. He was followed closely by Alaric and 50 elite knights. In the next moment, Galaner grunted as he swung his broadsword, his overwhelming mana pouring out like a violent wave. Boom! The shield-bearer unit that had formed a defensive formation couldn't even withstand his strike and was viciously torn apart. Blood-curdling screams echoed as the small unit led by Galaner and Alaric tore through the shield-bearers with unstoppable force. It was a bloodbath. The shield-bearers, known for their tough bodies and strong defensive abilities, didn't even last a few seconds under their ruthless attack. "Your Highness, they are trying to surround us," one of the elite knights reminded Alaric. "I know." Alaric's expression remained serene as he responded. "Ignore them. Our goal is to save Lord Marco. Whoever stops us will be killed," he added. Hearing his words, no one said anything more. In less than 20 minutes, the 800 shield-bearers failed to stop them and perished. Among the 50 elite knights that followed Alaric and Galaner, only 3 were killed. The rest were injured, but none of that threatened their lives. Impossible. How did they? Lemuel, who was hiding behind a group of powerful warriors, gnashed his teeth. He couldn't believe what he had witnessed. With only 50 warriors, the enemies managed to destroy 800 shield-bearers in just a quarter of an hour. Lemuel nervously observed them and realized that they were headed in the direction of Loras and the sword madman. Are they planning to rescue that crazy swordsman? His fear subsided and his face broke into a cunning smile. I'm sure they must have expended most of their mana to reach this place, but did they really think that breaking out of our encirclement would be easy? While thinking about this, he issued a series of commands directing the nearby troops to focus on Alaric's group. I have underestimated you. Loras stared deeply at his opponent. If only you were in your best condition this battle. He didn't continue his words, but his implied meaning was apparent. Marco was breathing heavily. His body was covered in wounds and bruises. He knew that he was close to his limits, but he had no intentions of backing down. I don't need your pity, he muttered coldly. In that case, let's end this battle. Loras sighed with a regretful expression. He stimulated his energy core and unleashed a terrifying wave of mana. Subsequently, he threw himself forward and swung his warhammer, bringing about an oppressive force that caused the air to twist and turn. Whoosh! Sensing his attack, Marco took a deep breath and quickly adjusted his battle stance. Since this is probably our last clash, I will use my full strength in this final attack. With this in his mind, he suddenly erupted with immense power as he released dozens of slashes in succession. Whoosh! Whoosh! The collision of their attacks created a devastating shockwave that turned everything around them into ruins. Boom! A thick cloud of dust obscured everyone's vision, preventing them from seeing the results of that clash. Which of the two won the battle? Lord Marco. Alaric's face fell. He felt Marco's aura weakening to a dangerous level, and he could barely perceive his presence. When the dust subsided, everyone saw Loras standing still with an expressionless face. However, there was a terrifying cut that stretched from his right shoulder down to his left hip, revealing his ribs. In front of Loras was a figure holding a broken sword. He was drenched in blood, his body full of cuts and bruises. His legs had been broken, so he just sat on the ground grimacing. It was Marco, barely clinging to his life. Just when Loras was about to deliver the final blow, an overwhelming sense of terror suddenly gripped his heart. Out of instinct, he tilted his body and retreated with a big leap. Boom! On the spot where he was standing just now appeared a fissure caused by a slash. Loras frowned as he turned his head to where the slash had come from. He saw a young warrior wearing gaudy armor with a red cape. He had a cold look on his face as he brandished his swords to kill the soldiers who were blocking his path. With my current condition, that slash would have killed me if I hadn't evaded in time. He was surprised to see the attacker. In his decades of experience on the battlefield, he had never seen a transcendent knight as young as this man. His instincts were screaming at him to retreat. However, Loras didn't retreat. Instead, he adjusted his stance and imbued more mana into his warhammer. With a fierce look, he shouted, "Come at me!" Surprisingly, the young transcendent knight didn't attack him again. He just scooped the severely injured Marco and retreated with his men. So their goal was to save that swordsman. Who is that young warrior? Loras furrowed his eyebrows. He wanted to pursue them, but his wounds suddenly opened up. Gritting his teeth, he injected mana into his wounds to temporarily stop the bleeding. "Commander Loras, please return with me to have your wounds treated." A concerned voice drifted into his ears. He turned his head and saw one of his subordinates rushing towards him on horseback. Loras didn't reject him. Given his condition, he wouldn't be able to fight properly. "He really got me good," he thought as he looked at the gruesome wound on his chest. "Your Highness, we have been surrounded." Alaric frowned. The elite knights they brought had mostly consumed their mana. All of them were also injured. Breaking out of the encirclement would be difficult given their situation. "It looks like I have no choice." He lifted his head and made a whistling sound akin to a bird's cry. Roar! In the next moment, a gigantic beast appeared in the sky, flapping its wings majestically as it looked down upon the mountain. Chapter 383. Griffin Knights Order Attacks. It's the Catastrophe-grade monster. Harun's troops were terrified when they saw Zephyr revealing itself. All of them had seen this beast fight against two mythical knights without being defeated. Suddenly Zephyr swooped down and spewed flames upon the soldiers of Harun, burning them into ashes in a matter of seconds. In just the blink of an eye, thousands of soldiers were killed. Alaric's group took the chance to carve out a path while the enemies were focused on Zephyr. They fought relentlessly, leaving a trail of blood in their wake. With their efforts, they finally managed to escape the enemy encirclement and found their way back to allied positions. Alaric didn't waste any time and headed straight to the eastern gates while carrying the unconscious Marco. "I need a healer here. Quick!" he shouted. A group of medical practitioners immediately rushed over upon hearing his words. Seeing them, Alaric jumped off his horse and handed Marco to the group. "Please take care of him and make sure that he will recover to his best form." "Yes, Your Highness." The medical practitioners solemnly nodded. They had seen worse cases than Marco's, so they were confident that they could bring him back to his peak with enough time. Alaric didn't linger and climbed onto his horse. The battle was far from over. Now that he had summoned Zephyr, the enemy's mythical knights would definitely make a move. Thinking about this, Alaric rushed out of the eastern gate to rejoin the battle. At this moment, Zephyr had already killed more than 20,000 soldiers on its own. However, its carnage was put to a stop when two formidable warriors appeared in front of it. "We meet again, beast." It was Dantos who had his arm cut off on their first battle. With the help of their healers, he had already regenerated another arm. Brandishing a pair of axes, he attacked Zephyr with unbridled fury. Whoosh! Whoosh! Zephyr blocked his axes with its sharp claws, causing sparks to fly out violently. Clang! Clang! Suddenly a blue arrow shot towards the beast with unbreakable speed. Whoosh! Roar! Zephyr emitted a furious roar and spat out a burst of flames. The blue arrow quickly melted under the intense heat. TSK. Roger clicked his tongue. A mythical knight wouldn't be able to easily destroy that arrow, but the monster managed to melt it with its flames in just a second. This was the power of a catastrophe-grade beast. Zephyr flew and lured them away from the mountain. "We need to kill it quickly." Dantos and Roger knew its intentions, but they still chose to follow it. Alaric, who was watching their battle, narrowed his eyes upon seeing this. "It's about time to reveal our trump cards. Release the signal," he shouted to the warriors atop the eastern walls. Hearing his words, the warrior responsible for sending the signal immediately released an arrow into the sky. When the arrow reached its peak flight, it exploded into a beautiful firework. Atop the walls of the main gates, Giovanni was facilitating the defense when he heard an unusual explosion coming from the eastern side of the fortress. Seeing this, he took a deep breath and mumbled, "The time has come. Griffin Knight's order, heed my command. Head to the eastern walls and destroy the enemies." He roared. As soon as his words fell, the Griffin Knight's order, led by Kristen, flew towards the eastern side of the fortress. Among them was Ignatius, who had disguised himself as an ordinary Griffin Knight. "I can feel them." Ignatius' spiritual perception detected the mythical knights battling the draconic lion. In a few minutes they arrived at the eastern walls and saw the warriors from both sides engaged in a brutal battle. Crush them! Kristen's furious voice echoed. With his command, the Griffin Knights controlled their mounts to dive into the enemy lines. Their unexpected appearance caught the enemies by surprise. The Griffin Knights' order unleashed murderous carnage, killing thousands of warriors in just a few breaths. Harun's warriors tried to stop them, but the Griffins were too fast and difficult to kill. No arrows or artillery managed to hit them, leaving them completely helpless. The battle, which was in a stalemate, suddenly took a turn with the appearance of the Griffin Knights' order. In another 15 minutes, the enemy troops, which numbered close to 200,000 during their attack, was reduced to 80,000. It was a disastrous loss. Lemuel, who was in the middle of the chaos, was ashen-faced. He was so close to reaching his goal, but they had stopped him time and again. Fuck. They actually had an aerial unit this powerful. He knew in that moment that there was no hope for them to win. Sound the fucking horns. We are retreating. He shouted in a hoarse voice, his face looking unsightly to behold. Brahm! With the blaring sounds of the horns, Harun abandoned their targets and quickly retreated. Don't let them escape. Kill them all, shouted Alaric as he urged his horse to move faster while chasing the enemies. His horse galloped like the wind, quickly approaching the retreating enemy troops. Under his leadership they chased after the enemies, killing another 10,000 in the process. Dantos and Roger were battling with the draconic lion when they sensed a fearsome aura rapidly moving towards them. Someone's coming. Roger was alarmed, his eyes narrowing. Both mythical knights turned their heads and saw an old man dressed in steel armor with a golden cape. It was Ignatius, who had removed his helmet. Fancy meeting you two here. Do you remember me? Ignatius smiled faintly at them. Dantos frowned. He couldn't remember someone like this old man from his memories. However, Roger, who was older than him, recognized Ignatius. It's you, Ignatius Firecrest. Roger was filled with disbelief. How are you still alive? I thought you died during that battle. Ignatius chuckled, amused by his words. Even an old fart like you managed to survive. Do you think I will die so easily? Chapter 384. Death. Roger's expression darkened. Ignatius was no ordinary expert. He was a four-ringed beast soul grandmaster who possessed powerful flame-type monster integrated traits. With his enormous power, he could fight 2 to 3 mythical knights on his own. Even he wasn't confident about facing a man of this caliber. Not to mention that there was also a catastrophe-grade beast. Roger silently gathered his mana while observing the old man's movements. Lord Roger, who is this old bastard? Dantos asked with a frown. This idiot. Roger cursed in his mind. Dantos was a newly promoted mythical knight who had just advanced several years ago, so it was normal for him not to know the identity of Ignatius. Only those old freaks who had participated in that battle half a century ago would be able to recognize him. Listen carefully, Lord Dantos. That man is someone we can't defeat, so when I give the signal you must retreat immediately. Roger warned him. Hearing this, Dantos was stunned. Just who is that old man? Why is Lord Roger afraid of him? He could see the urgency in Roger's face, something that Dantos had never seen before. While he was occupied by his thoughts, Roger's voice suddenly drifted into his ears. Now go. Dantos instinctively retreated when he heard Roger's words. On the other hand, Roger retreated in the opposite direction. Roar! Zephyr was furious and quickly chased after Dantos. Ignatius also pursued Roger. Dantos heard a roar echoing behind him. He turned his head and saw the draconic lion chasing after him. Damn it! Fuck! He imbued mana into his legs to increase his speed, but the beast was a lot faster than him. In just a few breaths it managed to overtake him and block his path. Dantos stopped in his tracks and brandished his axes ferociously. Get out of my way! Whoosh! Whoosh! Facing his attacks, Zephyr casually swiped its claws and struck down with raw, unbridled might. Bang! Dantos couldn't even defend himself and was ruthlessly struck, leaving deep gashes on his body. Arc! Dantos' axes were deformed, rendering most of their power useless. He also took heavy damage after receiving the beast's claws. His wounds were bleeding profusely, so he had to infuse mana into the cuts to stop the bleeding. Shit! I need to escape. He turned around and fled with all his might, but Zephyr didn't allow him to get away. It opened its huge gaping mouth and spat out a pillar of flames. Whoosh! Dantos' body was engulfed by the scorching flames. Arg! He screamed as he tried to put out the fire using his mana, but he found himself unable to extinguish the fearsome flames. Arg! Soon his voice died down and his body slowly turned into ashes. A mythical knight respected by many people died just like that. After killing him, Zephyr snorted and flew away with a flap of its wings. Meanwhile, in another part of the mountain pass, Ignatius and Roger had already engaged in battle. Roger released dozens of blue arrows at the old man while running away. Whoosh! Whoosh! Ignatius sneered. He summoned a rain of fire arrows with a wave of his hand and released them with a snap of his fingers. Whoosh! Whoosh! Roger's blue arrows were formidable, but Ignatius could summon fire arrows almost unlimitedly. Under this near-infinite fire arrows, Roger found himself unable to defend and was struck. Arg! He didn't die immediately and was still able to run, albeit pathetically. Ignatius clenched his fist and summoned a burst of flame underneath Roger's feet. Boom! Roger's charred body collapsed and fell to the ground. Ignatius stood before his charred corpse and muttered coldly, "Harun has made a big mistake in attacking our land." After saying those words, the old man left. Mission complete. Rewards: 1,500 battle points, 30 stat points, 30 EXP. Random trait upgrade card X1. A system notification popped up in front of Alaric's eyes while he was chasing after the retreating enemy troops, which forced him to stop in his tracks. It seems like Lord Ignatius and Zephyr succeeded. He let out a heavy sigh. This battle had cost them a lot of lives. Many peerless Western warriors had even perished. Do you want to use your random trait upgrade card? Yes. No. Alaric clicked yes. Congratulations. Your trait Sixth Sense, C, has been promoted to Sixth Sense, B. Following this notification, Alaric pulled up his stats. Alaric Silversword, Transcendent Knight, EXP. 95. 125/5000. Potential, S. Traits, Horseback Riding, B. Swordsmanship, SSS, Ruthless Slaughterer, SS, Close Combat, B. Archery, D. Hunting, C. Tracking, C. Sixth Sense, B. Monster Affinity, C. Mana Gathering, C. Appraisal, B. Strength, 300. Stamina, 300. Agility, 300. Vitality, 300. Endurance, 300. Mana, 305. Battle points, 2,600, 4,100. Stat points, 95, 125. Requirements for the next advancement: 5,000 EXP, 500 in all attributes, and 25,000 battle points. Finally upgraded something useful. The Sixth Sense trait had helped him escape death numerous times, so having it upgraded made him feel happy. Your Highness, should we continue chasing them? Galaner's voice suddenly drifted into his ears, pulling him from his thoughts. Alaric closed the system. He nodded his head. The enemy's morale is low. We must kill as many as we can, but return immediately once they move too far away from the mountain pass. Yes, Your Highness. Galaner saluted and left right away to relay his orders to the troops. This battle should be over, right? Alaric thought to himself, but as if to answer his question, another notification appeared in front of him. Mission: Harun's Invasion 3. Mission difficulty: hard. Having killed 2 of their mythical knights, Harun's military is left severely weakened. Send your troops into enemy territory and occupy 3 cities. Mission rewards: 1,500 battle points, 100 EXP, 50 stat points. Equipment upgrade card X1. Seeing this, Alaric took a deep breath and narrowed his eyes. He then lifted his head and looked at the horizon, his gaze unfathomable. The war is not over after all. Chapter 385. Lanmar, the 3rd largest city in the western region. 2 weeks went by after the last battle in Ackland Pass. News about Harun's defeat had already spread across the empire. Some names that were once unknown shot to fame and emerged as heroes. The Estanian Dragon leaderboard also experienced massive changes, with a few replacements in the top 10. However, although the empire was celebrating, the western region mourned. To defend Ackland Pass, more than 100,000 soldiers were killed. This was the highest number of casualties the empire had suffered in the past decades. Some even compared the tragedy to that brutal war 50 years ago. At this moment, in one of the mountains in Ackland Pass, a memorial ceremony was held for those who had died in the war. Other than the bereaved families, many notable figures were also present to join the ceremony. The atmosphere was solemn, and one could hear the incessant cries of the bereaved families. Alaric was seated on the frontmost seat with Giovanni and a few other high-ranking officials and military officers. Suddenly, a warrior dressed in mourning clothes approached Alaric and whispered into his ear, "Your Highness, Lord Marco has awakened." Hearing this, Alaric was pleasantly surprised. Marco was in critical condition when they had saved him, and he had been unconscious since then. Really? Alaric stared at the warrior. "Yes, Your Highness. I have confirmed it with my own eyes." The warrior responded. "That's great." Alaric smiled in relief. "I will visit him once the ceremony is over." The warrior took this as his cue to leave. Giovanni, who was seated next to Alaric, happened to hear parts of their conversation and couldn't help but ask, "What happened to Lord Marco?" "He is awake now," Alaric replied with a smile. Giovanni looked visibly relieved to hear this. "That's good. The ceremony continued for another hour. As soon as the memorial ceremony ended, Alaric hurried to leave. He wanted to check on Marco's situation. Alaric, wait. Are you going to visit Lord Marco? Giovanni's voice drifted into his ears. Turning his head, Alaric saw Giovanni's group approaching him. That's right. He nodded. Then let's go together. The Griffin Knights order is still here. We can ask them to send us there. Marco had been sent to a big clinic in Lanmar, the third largest city in the western region. The clinic boasted a large number of medical practitioners. They also possessed advanced medical tools and equipment, making it a perfect place for Marco to recover. I can ride on Zephyr. Alaric rejected his offer. The draconic lion was bigger and faster than the griffins. Giovanni chuckled. That's true. Just wait for us a bit. I will go and speak with Lord Kristen. All right. Alaric didn't mind waiting for them, so he went to a quiet corner with his group. Overlooking the mountain pass, Alaric felt emotional. What are you thinking, Your Highness? A calm voice echoed behind him. It was Michelle Catherine, the head of Jimena Viscounty. She also came here to attend the memorial ceremony. Alaric sighed and responded. Sometimes I wish that there were no wars. Do you think that is possible? Taken aback by his words, it took Michelle a few seconds before she could reply. That sounds impossible, Your Highness. Humans are inherently greedy. The emperors want more land, the nobles want more power, the warriors wish for wealth, and the commoners wish for equality. As long as people have these desires, we cannot stop wars. She shook her head indifferently. Alaric's expression became even heavier upon hearing her thoughts. Unless... Michelle was about to say something, but she hesitated. Unless what? Alaric was curious. Michelle stared deeply at him and opened her mouth. Unless someone conquers everything under the heavens and establishes a single empire to rule the whole world. Alaric was stunned. To establish an empire that would rule the entire world. Alaric felt something within him was stirred, but a voice suddenly interrupted his thoughts. Alaric, Lord Kristen has agreed. Let's go. It was Giovanni. He had come together with several Griffin Knights. Alaric nodded to Giovanni. He then summoned Zephyr with a whistling sound. The moment it appeared, everyone felt nervous. Whoosh! Zephyr landed in front of Alaric and issued a low growling sound as if to greet him. Alaric stroked the beast's head and spoke with it before he jumped onto its back. Let's head out, he told Giovanni's group. Giovanni nodded and gestured at the Griffin Knights. While they were preparing to leave, Michelle kept her eyes on Alaric, calmly watching his every move. Soon, under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the group soared into the sky and disappeared into the horizon. During their flight towards Lanmar, Alaric was still thinking about Michelle's words. It left an indelible impact that shook him to his core. Is it really possible to create a peaceful world? He was so occupied with his own thoughts that he didn't realize the passage of time. He didn't even hear Giovanni, who was repeatedly calling out to him. He was in this strange state until they landed on Lanmar a few hours later. Hey Alaric! Giovanni's voice pulled him from his stupor. Alaric shook off his thoughts and jumped off Zephyr's back. What happened to you? You seemed distracted. Giovanni furrowed his eyebrows. Alaric shook his head and smiled lightly. It's nothing. He didn't elaborate. Giovanni was curious, but he didn't press the topic. The clinic is over there. Leave the monsters to the Griffin Knights to handle. Alaric nodded and followed him to the building across the street. A group of people dressed in white coats approached them nervously. Greetings, Your Highness. Who is in charge here? Asked Giovanni as he scanned the group. An old man wearing a monocle stepped forward and introduced himself. That would be me, Your Highness. I am Bernie, the director of Lanmar Health Clinic. Giovanni nodded. Director Bernie, bring us to Lord Marco's room. Bernie lowered his head. This lowly one understands. Please follow me, Your Highness. Chapter 386. Another slave trader. The director of the clinic and the medical practitioners brought them to the VIP section meant for important clients and patients. This is Lord Marco's room. The director pointed at the room to the left with the door number 01 foot. We won't follow you inside, Your Highness. I will leave a few people outside in case you need something. All right. Thank you. Giovanni nodded. He then entered the room with Alaric. Upon entering, the strong smell of herbs and medicine assaulted their nostrils. In the middle of the room was a bed where a man could be seen sleeping. Seated on the sofa adjacent to the bed was a middle-aged woman in her 40s and a young boy who looked to be in his early teens. Startled by their unexpected visit, the middle-aged woman and the boy stood up nervously. Your Highness! The middle-aged woman recognized their identities. Alaric and Giovanni nodded to acknowledge their presence. This was Marco's wife and son. We heard that Lord Marco has regained consciousness. How is he now? Alaric inquired while looking at the sleeping Marco. It's true, Your Highness. My husband regained consciousness yesterday, but he is still weak. According to the healers and doctors, it would take a month or two for him to fully recover. Marco's wife replied. Hearing this, Alaric nodded. That's good. They asked Marco's wife a few more questions. I'm glad that Lord Marco is recovering well. If not for him, I would have died in Iron Sand Fort. Giovanni exhaled a deep breath. Marco's wife didn't say anything and just lowered her head. The mother and son looked uncomfortable and uneasy in their presence, so Alaric and Giovanni didn't stay for long. Too bad we couldn't speak with him, but no matter. At least Lord Marco has regained consciousness. Giovanni said as they stepped out of the room. We can stay here for a while and wait for him to wake up. Didn't you want to buy the official updated copy of the Estanian Dragon leaderboard? I am sure the city has it here. Alaric sent him a teasing look. They had received reports from their subordinates about this. They even got a pirated copy of the updated Estanian Dragon leaderboard. Giovanni chuckled in embarrassment upon hearing this. He was a vain man and it hadn't changed. The two stepped out of the clinic and headed to the nearest market. In order not to attract attention, they wore hoods to cover their faces. They also wore common clothes. Giovanni complained about his clothes on their way to the market, but Alaric simply laughed at him. When they arrived at the busy market streets, they heard the incessant shouts of the vendors and the chattering of the customers. The security here is not too bad. Giovanni casually commented as he observed the products being sold. Alaric agreed with a nod. They saw warriors occasionally patrolling the market streets. Under the watchful eyes of the warriors, no one dared to cause trouble. Hey brothers. I have the latest copy of the Estanian Dragon leaderboard. It's not too expensive. Just 1 silver coin. A middle-aged vendor called out to them while showing off a small booklet. Giovanni glanced at him in disdain and muttered. You want to sell a pirated copy for 1 silver coin? Who are you trying to fool? The vendor squeezed out an ugly smile and immediately corrected himself. Haha, you heard me wrong. I'm only selling this copy for 35 copper coins. Giovanni sneered. He ignored the middle-aged vendor and walked away with heavy strides. Alaric helplessly shook his head when he saw this. Look at this kid. I just told him not to attract attention, but he is already causing trouble. Giovanni rarely went to the public markets. Whenever he did, he would always bring a group of attendants with him. They had just arrived at the market and he was already losing patience. He is still the same guy even though he has changed a bit. Alaric thought to himself. Stop arguing with the vendors. Alaric reminded him in a chiding tone. Giovanni snorted in response. Along the way they encountered all sorts of products, but there was something that made them stop in their tracks. A small crowd of people gathered around a caravan eagerly watching the slaves being sold. What is going on over there? Giovanni frowned. Alaric wasn't unfamiliar with this sort of situation. They are trading slaves. Hearing this, Giovanni revealed a look of interest. Let's go and take a look. He didn't wait for Alaric's response and walked towards the caravan. Seeing this, Alaric could only helplessly follow. Is there anyone interested in my products? The trader was a brown-skinned, middle-aged man with a flat nose. He was scanning the gathered crowd, searching for a potential buyer. Unfortunately, no one seemed to be interested in his products. To be precise, no one could afford to buy his slaves. This was because his slaves were mostly warriors who possessed mana. These types of slaves were too expensive for the average citizen. With a sigh, the trader shook his head in disappointment as he mumbled. It seems like I have to go to another marketplace. Just then, a person draped in a black hood suddenly approached his slaves, observing them with a look of interest. Feeling annoyed, he shouted, Hey, don't touch them. Giovanni ignored him and continued to observe the slaves. You have some excellent slaves. How much are you selling them for? He was attracted to a beautiful slave who seemed to be in her late 20s. She was dressed in dirty linen clothes that could barely cover her towering peaks. Alaric facepalmed when he saw this scene. At a glance, he could already tell which slave he was attracted to. The middle-aged trader was about to retort when he saw Giovanni's expensive earrings. This must be a wealthy young lord. Thinking about this, he eagerly answered Giovanni's inquiry. You have good eyes, my lord. My slaves are the... Alaric used his appraisal on each slave and discovered something shocking. Chapter 387, Matilda. Matilda, 1-ringed beast soul novice EXP. 3 out of 500. Potential S. Integrated monster traits. Lustful cauldron S. Traits. Intimate lover S. Singing A. Dancing B. Painting B. Calligraphy B. Strength 11. Stamina 10. Agility 10. Vitality 18. Endurance 12. Mana 69. Alaric had a weird look as he watched a particular slave who had her head lowered. Her potential is high, but what's wrong with her traits and her integrated monster trait? She had the most peculiar traits he had ever seen. Alaric approached the woman and muttered, Lift your head. The woman quivered upon hearing his voice and lifted her head nervously. She looked like someone in her late teens or early 20s. Her face was surprisingly clean for a slave and her facial features also looked appealing. She had long black hair and a pair of enchanting monolid eyes. Alaric furrowed his eyebrows. Her facial characteristics were something common to the women of Veronica, another neighboring empire of Estania. "What's your name?" Alaric asked probingly. He had a feeling that this woman wasn't so simple. "Rem," the woman answered with a scared look. Hearing this, Alaric frowned. If he didn't have the appraisal trait, he wouldn't have known that she was lying. Her acting skills were also very good. Is she a spy from Veronica? Thinking about this, Alaric grabbed the traitor who was busy chatting with Giovanni. How much for this woman? The traitor was initially furious, but when he heard that he was asking for a price, he beamed. "You have good eyes, my lord. This woman is of Veronican descent, so she is quite rare." The traitor thought for a moment before he randomly blurted out a number. "How about 300 gold coins?" Alaric nodded. He rummaged through his pockets and took out 3 golden notes which were valued at 100 gold each. "I want her." Alaric handed the golden notes to the traitor without bothering to bargain. "This?" The traitor was momentarily stunned. He was already thinking of dropping the price, but this customer didn't even bother to bargain with him. Damn it! I should have increased the price. He was filled with regret, but he didn't show it on his face. With a candid smile, he accepted the 3 gold notes and stuffed them inside his inner pocket. "This woman is now yours, my lord." Alaric nodded. Giovanni, who was hesitating to buy, was surprised to see this, but he quickly sent Alaric a knowing smile. "I will buy this woman too. Give me a price," he told the slaver trader while pulling the big-breasted slave. The slave trader beamed and opened his mouth. "That woman is also special, my lord. She is a knight from Harun, so her price is a little bit higher. For 100 gold coins." Giovanni's mouth twitched, but he didn't want to lose face in front of a lot of people, so he grabbed 4 golden notes from his pocket and handed them to the slave trader. "Here." The slave trader's smile widened after taking his payment. "Ha ha ha. Good choice, my lord. If you are done, let's go," Alaric whispered to Giovanni. He noticed that they had attracted a lot of attention. If they dawdled, someone might recognize them. Giovanni also noticed that the crowd had doubled, so he nodded. "All right, let's go." Without hesitation, the two took their slaves and disappeared into the crowd. "Alaric, why don't we find somewhere to stay? We've been walking for a while now," whispered Giovanni as he nudged him with his elbow. How could Alaric not understand his intentions? If it were any other time, he would have ignored him. However, he wanted to know more about the slave he bought and see if he could gain some information from her. "Fine." Giovanni grinned. A moment later, the group arrived at a local hotel which was relatively high-end. "I will see you later." Giovanni sent him an ambiguous smile before pulling his slave to their room. After he left, Alaric turned his head to Matilda. "Follow me." Matilda followed him and stared at his back with a contemptuous look. All men are the same. Upon entering their assigned room, Matilda undressed herself and clung onto his arm as she whispered in a sultry voice, "Let me serve you, my lord." Turning his head, Alaric saw her staring at him with undisguised lust. He could feel her breasts and her skin rubbing against his arm. It made him feel a bit hot inside, but he repressed his desire and stared coldly at her. "What is your true identity?" Alarmed by his emotionless eyes, Matilda subconsciously stepped back. She put on a timid look and replied, What are you talking about, my lord?" Alaric remained calm in the face of her lies. He leaned forward and whispered into her ear, "Matilda." Matilda shivered upon hearing this. "How do you—" Stepping back nervously, she looked at Alaric with an incredulous expression on her face. She had never told anyone her real name since she had been captured, so how did this man know her name? "If you tell me who you are, I will spare your life. Otherwise—" Alaric suddenly grabbed her neck, making her gasp for breath. "KHKK. KHK." Alaric released her after a few seconds, making her collapse weakly to the floor. "Cough. Cough. Do you want to speak now?" Alaric's cold voice drifted into her ears. Matilda was so scared that she trembled in fright. "I will tell you. Please spare me, my lord. I'm willing to tell you everything." Alaric thought that she would refuse to speak, but it seemed like her willpower wasn't that strong. However, he was still skeptical whether she would tell him the truth. Is she just acting? He thought as he waited for her to speak. Matilda gathered her thoughts before she spoke. "My real name is Matilda. I am—" According to her, she was the daughter of a merchant household in Veronica, but her father unintentionally offended a powerful family after rejecting a marriage proposal for his daughter. Her entire family was annihilated, forcing her to flee the country and hide in the woods. She was then discovered by wandering mercenaries and was sold to a slave trader from Estania. Alaric frowned. "It seemed like I got it wrong. Now what should I do with her?" Chapter 388. Effects of the Lustful Cauldron. Note: our 18th chapter. You can skip this, but I suggest you read it to learn Matilda's backstory. Matilda timidly observed the changes in Alaric's expression. He seemed to be deliberating something, making her even more anxious. Is he going to kill me? Matilda wasn't a spy, but half of what she told Alaric was lies. The real reason why her family was annihilated was because of her integrated monster trait. Lustful Cauldron was a unique ability of forest nymphs. They were monsters with humanoid forms known for their beauty and innate charm. Other than their beautiful appearance, some powerful forest nymphs also wielded overwhelming spiritual power, making them masters of illusions and other types of spiritual abilities. Matilda got the Lustful Cauldron trait from a disaster-grade forest nymph. Its power was quite unique and was highly beneficial when engaging in intimate activities. The only downside was that it amplified her desire for intimacy. A powerful family from Veronica discovered this and wanted her to become the concubine of their family head, but he was an old man who was even older than her father. At that time, her father refused the proposal, which led the other party to use force to acquire Matilda. In the end, her entire family was annihilated, forcing her to flee from Veronica. Should I tell him the truth about my integrated monster trait? I have nothing to lose anyway. Besides, he doesn't look bad. Thinking about this, she looked at Alaric's handsome face. Her hands suddenly moved provocatively around his pants as if searching for something. Alaric, who was hesitating about what to do with her, was jolted awake when he felt her hands roaming around his legs indecently. He wanted to stop her, but he stopped himself and observed her performance with interest. This girl, she really knows what to do with those hands. Matilda suddenly felt a huge bulge under his pants, making her yelp in surprise. Isn't this too big? She felt inexplicably nervous and excited at the same time. She lifted her head and saw Alaric staring intently at her. Under his watchful eyes, she grabbed the bulge and gently rubbed it with her hand. She could feel it pulsating with her every move. While feeling his erect cock, she subconsciously reached out to her wet slit and rubbed the sensitive area with her fingers. She shivered and let out a moan at the unexpected burst of pleasure. Alaric was aroused when he saw her pleasuring herself with her fingers. Unable to contain his desire, he lowered his pants and grabbed her hair. Ah! Matilda cried out in shock. Alaric forced her to look at him and slapped her face with his shaft. Pa! Pa! It's so warm and hard. Suck it. Alaric's indifferent voice drifted into her ears. Hearing this, she obediently grabbed his stiff cock and brought it to her mouth. It was so big that just the head could barely fit in her mouth. Suddenly, Alaric grabbed her hair and pushed his hips, thrusting his cock deeply into her throat, making her gag. Her eyes rolled upwards as she choked. Gawk! She could barely breathe as Alaric's big and hard shaft repeatedly entered her throat. Strangely, she didn't want to push him away. Instead, it multiplied her desire. Pa! Pa! While he was thrusting his hips vigorously, she rubbed the sensitive part on her slit, making her feel the urge to pee. Oh my God! I'm coming! MHMN. She moaned as a burst of warm liquid leaked out of her slit. She hadn't even adjusted her thoughts when Alaric suddenly lifted her and forced her against the wall. What are you doing? Alaric's eyes resembled those of a beast that was about to devour its prey. Without answering her, he kissed her lips and sucked her tongue while his hands roamed around her delicate curves. MNN. He then lifted both her legs, pressed her against the wall, and pushed his stiff shaft inside her slit. At that moment, he felt that he had torn something apart, but he ignored it and moved his hips back and forth. Pa! 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 Matilda felt a wave of pain between her legs as Alaric ravaged her body. However, the pain soon vanished and was replaced with overwhelming pleasure. She could no longer hold back her moans as she drowned herself in the sea of pleasure. Grabbing Alaric's neck, she whispered to his ear. I'm coming. Faster. Alaric was provoked by her seductive voice. Then I won't hold back. While biting her neck, he grabbed her breasts and moved his hips faster. Pa! 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 The wave of pleasure was like an electric current that made Matilda shiver in ecstasy. She clutched her legs tightly around his waist and followed his rhythm. Fuck me harder. After almost half an hour, Alaric shot all his warm fluids inside her body. It was then that he felt an unexpected burst of energy coursing through his body. You have gained 1 EXP. A system notification appeared in front of him. What's this? He was stunned. Is this because of her integrated monster trait? Alaric thought about her Lustful Cauldron trait. Now I understand why it's an serrated integrated monster trait. Alaric looked at the tired Matilda, his gaze softening. With his stiff cock still inside her body, he moved his head to her ear and whispered in a domineering voice. Who do you belong to? To am all yours. Matilda replied between her deep breaths. Hearing this, Alaric smirked and carried her to the bed. Wait, aren't you done yet? She panicked. Alaric pulled his shaft, which was still dripping wet. What do you think? Looking at his hard cock, Matilda spread her legs invitingly while holding her breasts. Do it gently this time. Alaric chuckled, slapped her face and whispered. That's not up to you, my little slave. Let's see if I can get more EXP from her. With this in his mind, he forcefully penetrated her slit. Pa! 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 Wait. Be gentle. Chapter 389. Updated Estanian Dragon Leaderboard Ranking. About 2 hours later, under Matilda's tearful begging, Alaric finally stopped ravaging her body. In those 2 hours, Alaric didn't get another EXP, but he wasn't too disappointed. He had finally discovered another way to farm EXP, but he still needed to find out how much EXP he could get from engaging in intimate activities with Matilda. Alaric turned his head and saw a weary-faced Matilda sprawled all over the bed, her body covered in bodily fluids that emitted a strange smell. Sensing his gaze, she instinctively covered her naked body and pleaded, "Please, my lord. I can't take it anymore." Alaric felt a bit guilty when he saw this. "Clean yourself up. We will be leaving soon." Without waiting for her response, he wore a bathrobe and headed to the hotel's public bathroom. Matilda watched him leave the room with a complicated look on her face. Alaric hadn't told her about his identity, but she knew that he was a very powerful warrior from the overwhelming pressure he exuded. She guessed that he possessed a strong background, so she could only abandon all hopes of escaping. Grimacing, she got up with great difficulty. What will become of me? The uncertainty of her future brought her a sense of fear and anxiety. When Alaric entered the public bathroom, he saw Giovanni coming out. Giovanni also spotted him and hurried to his side. "Alaric, I thought you had already left." The guy grinned from ear to ear as he boasted about his experience with the big-breasted slave. "That woman is a knight of Harun. You should be careful lest she slit your throat in your sleep." Alaric warned him. Although the slaves were equipped with a slave bracelet that forced them to submit, there were still times when these slave bracelets would lose their effectiveness, which would give them enough time to harm their masters. Giovanni chuckled at his words and responded in disdain. "What can a mere knight do to me?" Alaric shook his head and no longer bothered to argue with him. "Alaric, how about we do her together? I think that would be interesting. That girl is quite stubborn, and I think she still needs more training," Giovanni suddenly suggested with an ambiguous smile. Alaric frowned and pushed him away. "Move. I need to clean myself." He then entered the bathroom without looking back. Giovanni smirked. "Look at that pretentious kid." After getting closer to Alaric, he found the guy more to his liking compared to his older brother Exler. After half an hour in the bathroom, Alaric headed back to his assigned room and found Matilda already dressed. Her hair was still wet after taking a quick bath at the women's bathroom. "Let's go. We will buy some clothes for you." Alaric couldn't bear to see her wear the same dirty clothes. He knew that she was still wary of him, so to get her to trust him fully, he had to treat her well. Matilda was surprised to hear this. She was just a slave, and no master would buy clothes for his slave. That was what she believed. "You want to buy clothes for me, my lord?" She couldn't help but confirm it. Alaric nodded. "If you're done, let's go. There is a clothing shop across the street. We should be able to find something you can wear there." Hearing this, Matilda excitedly rose to her feet. "Yes, my lord." As soon as they stepped out of the hotel, they saw Giovanni and the big-breasted slave waiting for them outside. "What took you so long? We've been here for over 10 minutes. Giovanni said with an exasperated tone. Alaric gave him a sidelong glance and replied, "I'm not as weak as you, who only last for less than 15 minutes. Giovanni's face twitched at his words. "You!" Alaric ignored him and pulled Matilda to the store across the street. "Hey, Alaric! Wait!" Giovanni pulled the big-breasted slave and followed them. Later that day, the group had finally bought the updated Estanian Dragon leaderboard from a legitimate seller. Giovanni chuckled arrogantly while pointing to his name in the booklet. Rank 37, Giovanni Aurelius Estania. "I never thought I would rise in the rankings this fast." Suddenly Alaric appeared beside him and pointed to his ranking in the booklet. Giovanni's smile stiffened when he saw Alaric's ranking. Rank 17, Alaric Silversword. He closed the booklet and forced a dry chuckle. "Not bad, but don't be so arrogant. I might surpass you if I seriously train myself." He snorted. Alaric waved his hand dismissively. "Yeah, sure. Whatever." The two were arguing back and forth when they saw a group of medical practitioners rushing towards them. "Your Highnesses, we finally found you," spoke one of them while trying to catch his breath. "What happened?" Giovanni raised an eyebrow. "Lord Marco is awake. He told us to look for you. It seems like he wants to speak with your Highnesses." Hearing this, Alaric and Giovanni glanced at each other and nodded. "Lead the way." The group followed the medical practitioners to the clinic. Along the way, Matilda couldn't hide the astonishment on her face. "They are actually princes. Don't tell me they are the heirs of Estania." She suddenly felt that it wasn't so bad to become Alaric's slave. Rather than marrying an old ugly guy, she would rather be Alaric's obedient little slave. Soon the group arrived at VIP room number 01. Upon entering, they saw Marco leaning against the headboard as he chatted with his wife and son. "Your Highnesses." Marco smiled faintly upon seeing them. His wife and son also greeted them respectfully. Now that Marco was awake, it was as if they had found their backbone and were now less fearful of the two princes. "Lord Marco, I'm glad to see you doing well." Alaric smiled at him. Giovanni also greeted him. They asked Marco about his condition, which the latter answered one by one. A moment later Marco took the chance to change the topic. What happened to Ackland Pass? As soon as he said this, the big-breasted slave standing behind Giovanni suddenly trembled. Chapter 390. Giovanni is getting married? After I took you to the fortress. Alaric recounted the events that followed after Marco lost consciousness. While he was telling Marco what had happened, Giovanni sensed an anomaly on the big-breasted knight. She had her lowered so no one could see her expression, but Giovanni with his acute senses could tell that she was crying. He furrowed his eyebrows. He had no intention of comforting her. After all, they had once been enemies on the battlefield. So that's what happened. Marco let out a heavy sigh, his face filled with complex emotions. He thought that he would die in that battle, but Alaric had saved him once more. "Your Highness, you saved me for the second time. How can I repay this?" Alaric cut him off. "You don't need to repay me, Lord Marco. I only did what I think was right. Estania still needs you to protect the western region. I hope that you will continue protecting our lands." Hearing this, Marco lowered his head and promised. "I will faithfully serve Estania until my last breath." "Good." Alaric smiled faintly. Marco glanced at the people around and said, "Please leave. I would like to speak to the Highnesses privately." Hearing this, everyone including his wife and son left the room. "What do you want to talk about?" Giovanni crossed his arms with a frown. Marco took a deep breath and spoke in a cold voice. "I cannot accept this. Many of our warriors died because of them." His shoulders trembled as fury took over him. "Your Highnesses, we must do something to appease the souls of our fallen soldiers." He glanced at the two princes. "Are you saying that you want us to attack Harun?" Giovanni's eyes turned cold. "Not necessarily." Marco shook his head and explained himself. "We can ask Harun to compensate us for the damage they caused. Then we will distribute what we can get from them to the families of the deceased." "That is not a bad idea." However, Alaric suddenly spoke. Both Marco and Giovanni turned their heads at him. "Harun will never willingly compensate us. Unless we force them to." Alaric's words made them frown. "And how can we force them to compensate us?" Giovanni asked. "Simple. We just need to attack them and pressure them into compensating us." Alaric smiled coldly. He still had an active mission that would require him to occupy 3 cities before he could get the reward. The rewards weren't that great, but the equipment upgrade card was quite tempting. During the last battle, he realized how important it was to have powerful equipment. If all his items were epic rated, he wouldn't have to worry about getting surrounded by hundreds of enemies. "But we don't have enough men to launch a war." Giovanni stared deeply at him. In the last battle in Ackland Pass, they lost over 100,000 warriors. It would take a while before they could replace those who had died. Alaric nodded. "That's true. The western region suffered a big loss this time, so we can't rally troops from them." Giovanni seemed to have understood his meaning and was startled. "Hold on. Are you saying that?" Alaric smiled. "Turns out you aren't that stupid." Giovanni was about to retort, but Alaric had already spoken. "We can gather our troops from the other regions. But doing this would take some time. Even if we urge everyone to hurry, it would still take months to move a large number of troops." "Who said we are in a hurry? Since we are going to attack them, we ought to plan this properly. Besides, we still need to get His Majesty's approval before we can mobilize the Empire's troops." Alaric replied. The 3 exchanged their viewpoints for almost an hour before they decided to end the conversation. "Let's talk about this some other time. Lord Marco is still recovering, so it wouldn't be appropriate to stay here for long." Alaric reminded them. Giovanni still wanted to get things clarified, but he decided to temporarily put the matter aside. "Fine. Lord Marco, once you have fully recovered, come and find me immediately." Alaric sent Marco a look. "I understand, Your Highness." Marco nodded. "Then we will be leaving first. If you need anything, just send someone to find me." After bidding him farewell, Alaric pulled Giovanni out of the room. When they stepped out of the room, they saw that everyone was still waiting outside chatting about random things. "Your Highnesses." They greeted the two as soon as they stepped out of the room. "We are leaving." Alaric nodded to Matilda. Marco's wife and the medical practitioners sent them off. Upon leaving the clinic, Giovanni glanced at Alaric and asked, "Where are we headed next?" "I will return to the north. I need to gather more soldiers, so I must speak with the northern leaders." Alaric responded in a stern voice. The mission wasn't urgent, so he wanted to return to North Pinetown to see his family. "Are you going to see your newborn sister?" Giovanni smiled. He had heard from his informants that Lucas's wife Maria Keller had given birth to a girl. Alaric smiled with a look of anticipation. "That too." Giovanni nodded. "All right. Leave the central region to me. I will gather as many troops as I can from the central households, but it might take a while since I still have to convince that sissy Exler. The two chatted for a while before they exchanged farewells. Wait, Giovanni suddenly called out to him before they left. Alaric raised an eyebrow. Do you still have something to tell me? Giovanni laughed awkwardly and pushed the big-breasted knight toward him. Bring this woman with you. What is the meaning of this? Alaric frowned. I will be getting married soon, so I don't want any nasty rumors going around. Come on. Just do this for your cousin. She isn't bad-looking anyway. Giovanni replied with embarrassment. You will be getting married soon? Alaric was stunned. He hadn't heard about this from his family. Giovanni chuckled. We have been keeping it confidential, but the news should be released soon. Anyway, just take care of her. I'm off. The guy didn't even wait for his response and left in haste. Alaric could only helplessly watch him leave. Looking at the big-breasted knight, Alaric sighed helplessly. What's your name? Chapter 391. Murder in the Town Hall. The big-breasted knight didn't respond and just lowered her head. Seeing this, Alaric furrowed his eyebrows. This woman might bring me trouble. Should I just kill her now? Killing intent flashed in his eyes, but he quickly abandoned the idea. Let's go. We are heading to Birmingham Island to take care of some things. Before heading to North Pinetown, he still had to tie up some loose ends. There were plenty of things to do, and it wouldn't be good to leave without taking care of them. It was only for a moment, but the big-breasted knight felt his killing intent. She thought that she would finally be liberated, but things didn't go as she had hoped. Alaric went to a secluded area and summoned Zephyr with a sharp whistling sound. Roar! The beast circled above the city, alerting all the residents. If the officials and military officers weren't informed about the identity of the beast, they would have panicked. Zephyr descended towards Alaric's location and landed in front of him. Growl. It emitted a low growl and rubbed its giant head on his body as if to greet him. Both Matilda and the big-breasted knight looked fearfully at the beast. Why, your highness, is that your tamed beast? Matilda was visibly shaking as she pointed at the draconic lion. Alaric nodded indifferently. Hop on. We are flying to Birmingham Island. It would take us a long time if we went there on foot. On the other hand, the big-breasted knight was filled with profound terror. During the war in Ackland Pass, she had seen this beast spew out flames and kill her comrades. She couldn't forget the hellish scene of seeing her acquaintances being engulfed by those fearsome flames before they turned into ashes. She didn't even know how she had survived that day. Alaric grabbed both ladies by the waist before jumping onto Zephyr's back. In the next moment, the draconic lion flapped its wings and flew into the sky. Zephyr's speed was too fast for both women, so Alaric used his mana to protect them. In a few hours, they finally saw the magnificent view of the island town. So that's Birmingham Island. Matilda was amazed by the stunning landscape that looked magical from above. She had only heard of this island town from the slaves. She thought that they were just exaggerating when they boasted about the island's beauty, but now she realized that they were telling the truth. Hold tight. We are descending. Alaric's voice drifted into their ears. As soon as his words fell, Zephyr suddenly dove towards the town. Whoosh! Upon arrival, Alaric immediately headed to the town hall to begin his tasks. Alaric stayed in Birmingham Island for another week to deal with the documents related to the compensation of the deceased warriors. This sounded easy, but with the large number of recipients, it took him a week to get things sorted out. Now all that was left was for the officials to double-check the documents he had signed and make sure that all the stated compensation would be delivered to the families. It was already nighttime when Alaric finished his tasks, and his back was sore from sitting all week. I should have brought Emma with me. With her administrative abilities, things would have been easier if she were here. Author's note. Emma is someone he had saved before. See Chapter 230 for reference. Suddenly, he heard a series of footsteps from the hallway. Your Highness, something happened. Someone murdered an official. A minor bookkeeper shouted anxiously as he rushed to Alaric's side. Hearing this, Alaric frowned. He calmly stood up from his seat and muttered, "Tell me what's going on as we walk." The bookkeeper nodded and followed him outside the office while recounting what had transpired. According to the bookkeeper, a minor official was killed by someone he had brought to the island. Other than his subordinates who had recently arrived on the island, he had only brought 2 slaves with him. Are you referring to the women I brought? He glanced at the bookkeeper. Why, wise, your highness. I still don't know the reason behind her actions. When I saw her kill Mr. Tsong, I immediately rushed here to inform you. The bookkeeper replied, his face covered in sweat. He was only a mortal, so seeing someone being killed in front of him filled him with terror. Soon they arrived at the scene of the crime, the hallway adjacent to the women's comfort room. A large crowd had gathered at the scene, but no one dared to get close to Mr. Tsong's corpse. This was because a woman drenched in blood was standing next to his corpse. She was holding a bloodied sword while staring at the official's corpse with unmasked loathing. "It's her." Seeing this woman, Alaric frowned. It was the big-breasted knight. Your Highness, that slave killed Mr. Tsong. Your Highness, please deliver justice. The crowd was agitated. They were furious that one of their workmates had been killed. Alaric didn't rush to make a decision. There has to be a reason that compelled her to kill that official. Looking at the female knight, Alaric asked in a cold voice, "Can you explain what happened here?" All eyes were on her, but the female knight didn't seem to be nervous. She lifted her head and stared deeply at Alaric, her eyes without remorse. "I don't like him, so I killed him," she responded emotionlessly. Hearing this, the crowd became even more furious. "How dare you kill Mr. Tsong? Are you out of your mind? That bitch must be crazy. Mr. Tsong was such a gentleman. She must be hanged." Facing everyone's insults and threats, the female knight remained unusually calm. Alaric studied her expression and sensed no fluctuations in her emotions. Did she do this intentionally to get herself killed? Since following him to Birming Island, this woman had never told him anything about herself. If not for his appraisal trait, he wouldn't even know her name. She would do all the tasks he would give her, but she had never once engaged in a proper conversation with him. It was as if she had lost interest in everything. Alaric sighed. She must have been deeply traumatized by the war in Ackland Pass. Just as he was about to say something, Matilda suddenly appeared and rushed to his side. "Your Highness, the guy they call Mr. Tsong is a pervert. He followed us inside the women's comfort room and touched me indecently. Celine only killed him because he—" "Enough!" the female knight shouted as she glared at Matilda. She then turned her head towards Alaric and muttered, "I am ready to face my punishment." Alaric let out a heavy sigh and shook his head. Is what Matilda said true? The female knight named Celine didn't respond and just stared at him. Alaric understood the gist of it, but he didn't believe Matilda right away. He sent the bookkeeper a look and instructed, "Bring the investigators here and tell them to investigate the victim." The bookkeeper was still scared, but he acknowledged Alaric's command. "Yes, Your Highness. The rest of you may leave." Alaric dispersed the crowd. Everyone was disgruntled, but they didn't dare disobey the prince. In half a minute, the hallway was closed off, leaving only Alaric and the two ladies. "Celine, right? Follow me. I have to detain you while the investigation is underway." "But Your Highness, Celine is innocent," Matilda exclaimed at the unfair treatment. "Whether she is innocent or not, it will be proven later. We must follow the necessary procedures to make everyone shut up. If I use my authority to make a decision, others would only talk behind our backs. Besides, your friend doesn't want to cooperate, so we can only do this to prove her innocence." Alaric rubbed his temples in exasperation. He was already done with his task, but it seemed like he had to stay for another day or two to deal with this incident. Matilda no longer said anything after seeing his annoyed face. The female knight left her sword at the crime scene and followed them quietly with her head lowered. Upon stepping out of the town hall, they saw Michelle Catherine rushing towards them with an urgent look. "Your Highness, I heard that something happened. Has it been dealt with?" she asked, her eyes darting towards the female knight behind Alaric. Alaric shook his head and replied, "The incident is still being investigated. We will probably get results tomorrow." "I see." Seeing that he was not in the mood for a conversation, Michelle no longer said anything and just followed them quietly. Soon they arrived at the town's prison. They saw that the mayor was already there together with some officials. "Your Highness." "Greetings, Your Highness." Alaric waved his hand. "This is the suspect. She will be detained until the investigation is over. Make sure that you keep an eye on her. Your subordinate understands." Chapter 392. Returning to North Pine Town. The investigators arrived soon after, and they immediately began their investigation. All the town hall employees and even the officials were interrogated. It was a sleepless night for everyone. Even Alaric couldn't sleep properly with all the commotion, so he could only do his daily exercises. At this moment, he was on the training ground of House Jamina's estate. "I haven't done my daily mission since I returned here." Alaric sighed helplessly. Most of his time was spent dealing with all the paperwork, so he didn't have the time to do his daily exercises. The only attribute he was able to increase was his mana. He also tried to exploit Matilda's lustful cauldron trait by engaging in intimate activities with her, but his EXP didn't increase no matter how many times he did it with her. Several hours later, he completed the final exercise and received his rewards. You received 20 battle points. You received 3 EXP. You received 3 stat points. I feel better now that I have let off some steam. He wiped off the sweat on his face using a towel. Alaric's Silversword, Transcendent, Knight, EXP. 125. 128/5000. Potential, S. Traits, Swordsmanship, SSS, Ruthless Slaughterer, SS. Horseback Riding, B. Close Combat, B. Sixth Sense, B. Appraisal, B. Hunting, C. Tracking, C. Monster Affinity, C. Mana Gathering, C. Archery, D. Strength, 300. Stamina, 300. Agility, 300. Vitality, 300. Endurance, 300. Mana, 305. 310. Battle points, 4,100. 4120. Stat points, 125. 128. Requirements for the next advancement. 5,000 EXP 500 in all attributes and 25,000 battle points. I already have 128 stat points, but I should keep them for now. I will distribute them if necessary. He closed the system screen and headed to the bathroom to remove the filth from his body. After a quick bath, he went to his room and drifted into sleep. The next day, Michelle Catherine informed him about the results of the investigations. According to her, it had been found out that the victim was actually an old pervert. A few female employees who had been victims of his actions spoke about their experiences. With the testimonies from the female employees and Matilda acting as the witness, Celine has been proven not guilty. She was later released from prison by the mayor himself. Those who had slandered Celine were also forced to apologize to her. The matter concluded before noon and the case was closed. I told you guys. Celine is innocent. Matilda glared at the town hall employees. The people who had been noisy yesterday didn't dare look at her, afraid that they would be punished for false accusations and defamation. Seeing that no one dared to speak, Matilda snorted before she went to Celine's side to comfort her. Celine, I'm glad that you have been proven innocent. Otherwise I would be the first one to complain. She intentionally increased the volume of her voice as if she wanted Alaric to hear her. Celine didn't say anything, but she felt a touch of warmth upon hearing her words. She could feel that Matilda was genuinely concerned about her. Alaric sent them a look and said, "Pack your stuff. We will be leaving after lunch." He didn't want to waste any more time. He still had to gather the northern troops after taking a look at the situation in North Pinetown. Hearing this, Matilda could only hide the dissatisfaction in her heart. She thought that Alaric would care for her after taking her body, but the guy was still guarded against her. Other than the times when he needed to vent his desire, he wouldn't even bother to talk to her. Is he still suspecting that I'm a spy? Maybe he doesn't like Veronicans. Matilda was starting to misunderstand Alaric as someone who was racist against Veronicans. However, Alaric was unaware of her thoughts. The trio headed to House Jimena's main dining hall, where a banquet had already been prepared. Your Highness, I hope you will enjoy our local delicacies. If you like something, just tell me and I'll have the chefs pack some for you. Michelle escorted him to his seat. You even prepared a banquet for us. Thank you, Lady Michelle. Alaric smiled faintly at the Viscountess. It is my honor to serve your Highness. She replied with a bow. During the meal, Alaric and Michelle discussed future cooperation. She even hinted that she would be willing to follow him to North Pinetown, but Alaric only replied ambiguously. Michelle Catherine was a capable woman, more so than most noble ladies he had encountered. However, Alaric thought that leaving her in the western region would be better for her growth. He wanted her to be his cornerstone figure for the faction he would build in the west. Alaric explained this to her and Michelle readily agreed. Thank you for placing your trust in me, Your Highness. I will not disappoint you. Michelle was happy to get his support. With Alaric backing her, her goal to expand House Jimena's influence would be a lot smoother. I enjoyed the food. Can you help me pack some snacks for these two? Alaric said as he wiped his mouth with a napkin. Your subordinate obeys. Michelle nodded with a light smile. She then beckoned to the servants and told them to prepare the best snacks for the two ladies. An hour later, the servants helped them tie the boxes which contained all their stuff on Zephyr's back. Other than Matilda and Celine, Alaric was also taking Dudu and her grandfather Rewin with him. A large crowd had also gathered at the estate to send them off. I will leave Galliner and the others here. If you have orders for them, just give them the word. I have already told them to obey your instructions while I am gone. Alaric didn't plan to take Galliner and the others with him since they didn't have their own flying beast. Michelle was stunned by his words. Alaric was actually giving her the authority to command his troops. After gathering her thoughts, she bowed deeply. I will put them to good use, my lord. You can rest assured. With Alaric's troops in her hands, no one in the west would dare to disobey her. Alaric was satisfied with her attitude and gave her a nod of approval. I trust your abilities. The two exchanged words before he bid everyone farewell. In the next moment, everyone watched as Zephyr flew into the sky and slowly disappeared into the horizon. He left. The mayor let out a sigh. He had been feeling incredibly pressured because of Alaric's presence. Now that he was gone, he felt more at ease. It wasn't just him, the officials and even the people in House Jimena were relieved. Disperse. We still have to complete the task that His Highness has assigned to us. Michelle dismissed the crowd. The officials and servants immediately left, leaving only Michelle and the military officers of Alaric's troops behind. Staring at the imposing warriors, Michelle was a bit nervous. She was only an elite knight, so she was still uncomfortable around stronger warriors. Noticing her gaze, Galliner stared at her and reminded her in a cold tone. Lady Michelle, we will follow your instructions, but if I deem your orders inappropriate, then... His words trailed off, but Michelle understood what he was trying to convey. It looks like I need to build trust with these people. She thought, her eyebrows furrowed. A few days later, in the estate of House Silversword, Lucas was walking in the back garden with his wives Maria and Jade. I think the child likes the flowers here. Jade chuckled as she looked at the newborn baby in Maria's embrace. Lucas and Maria smiled at her words. Suddenly Lucas felt a strong aura approaching them from a distance. He turned his head and narrowed his eyes. What happened? Jade frowned when she noticed his unusual expression. Maria also looked at him with concern. Something strong is coming. Lucas muttered as he stared intently in a certain direction. Wait, it's Zephyr, he exclaimed in surprise. He was also inwardly relieved that it wasn't an enemy. The eyes of the two mothers lit up upon hearing his words. Is Alaric back? Lucas nodded with a faint smile. He is, and it looks like he brought new people with him. In that moment his perception fell onto the little girl who was hugging Alaric's leg. Strange. How peculiar. This little girl seems to be hiding a secret. With his powerful perception he immediately sensed that something was off about this particular little girl. Her aura resembles that of a monster. Could she be? Realization dawned on him. How did that kid manage to find a half-monster during his trip? He was curious about what Alaric had been through in the West. Let's go. I'm sure Alaric will be happy to see his sister. Maria's voice drifted into his ears, pulling him from his thoughts. All right, let's go. If you want access to fast updates or the full novel in high-quality audio, contact me now and buy. I offer over 300 complete audiobooks from Pocket FM, Webnovel, Audible, and more. No locked episodes, no subscriptions, just one-time payment via PayPal or Ko-fi. Message me directly on Telegram or WhatsApp, or check out the full list of available novels on Discord. Start listening to your next favorite audiobook today.